Awesome. Welcome to the Why Music podcast, where we talk to independent artists about their journeys, the inspirations behind their music, and ultimately why they make music. This next artist is a songwriter and producer based out of Ireland. Working with all kinds of artists and performing with various bands, he has quite the experience with honing his craft. Writing his own fusion of R&B, pop, and jazz, there's no telling where he will go next. Welcome, Drew.
Thank you very much. It's really, really great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. So I always like to kind of kick things off with learning about where your journey with music kind of all started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, for me, I think like most people have a kind of a musical, person in their house or someone who loves music. For me, that was kind of always like either like really a lot of it was could have come from my mom and then maybe from my friends or my siblings. But we like did the whole like learning piano at a young age and then picked up guitar in my teens and stuff like that. But yeah, I think it wasn't until I was like 15 or 16 when I was kind of like, oh, there's something about this music thing that I quite liked. So yeah, I guess then I went on and studied it from there. Like I went and studied it in college and stuff. Always just kind of was like, I'm gonna like have a career in music though. I think it was just kind of like straight up arrogance in the sense that I was like, I don't care if it's like I'll be a pop star or if I'm a music teacher or if like I just was like music's gonna be my thing. Like it's just gonna be like I don't care what element it is gonna be in it, if it's teaching, if it's whatever. I just want that to be my thing. So yeah, I kind of just ended up from that age just dedicating it. Ultimately my pursuit was always to do like to be songwriting or like to be producing and to be like physically making music or performing music. But I just ultimately was happy with the experience of music. So I think that kind of always led me to kind of various different paths, exploring kind of like mixing and producing and writing and all these kind of things and working in studios and stuff. And yeah, so I felt like that kind of openness to like where my trajectory might go kind of drove my trajectory to a degree because I kind of just grabbed anything. But particularly like, yeah, so yeah, basically that was kind of where it began for me, was learning that. And then the people I met along the way, like I had a cool jazz piano teacher who really inspired me to just kind of get into jazz and stuff like that too. And yeah, so like, I definitely was lucky enough to be able to surround myself with like people more talented than I am. And really just like grab onto that, because I feel like that's kind of always been my kind of idea, was kind of just be a sponge and just learn what you can from people. So yeah, I think that's always been my kind of motive, and that's always kind of been my mindset with music. I think that's been with me from the very, very beginning. Just because it's kind of an endless journey really of growing and learning, and there's no stopping, at any point. So yeah, I guess that's kind of where it starts and where I am right now to it.
So like you said, like it started with piano and turned into guitar, and that just at that point, even it was your thing, like music is what I'm going to be doing. What
Yeah,
that looks like, no idea, but it's
no,
going to be
exactly, just
thing.
blindness. But I think it was, what's so funny is I remember and anyone who ever makes their own music would probably find this really funny. I remember I was like 15 and I was like, if I buy a microphone, I could like buy a microphone and like like use my home computer or whatever. I could probably like record my own records and I wouldn't even need anyone. And I've kind of still been doing that to this day, like 10 years later. So yeah, I think that was the beginning of the process, was just like I thought how that would be an easy step, but really that's like an enormous step. It's like the whole thing, it's not even a step. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely a lot you can do with just a laptop and a microphone. That's why we're kind of in the space of anybody can do it from
Hmm.
their basement. There's all these home studios and things that probably don't even qualify as like home studios that
Oh, for
people are
sure.
just
Yeah.
making crazy music out of,
Hmm.
because that's where things are these days.
Absolutely.
That's where the power is.
Hmm.
So, at what point, like, obviously you started writing at some point and you started just kind of learning everything that you could. At what point was it like, being an artist is something that I want to put a lot of like time and energy into, like where it became the songs that you're writing and maybe even producing, like what was the turning point where it was like, I'm just gonna kind of put this stuff out there and see what happens?
Um, I think it kind of always that was always like the initial intention. I think I always had a music as kind of like something that was like very personal. Like it was always something that like I was kind of precious about, be it my own music taste or whatever. Like I've always kind of like really stand certain artists like since I was like 13, 12, 13, just like fall in love with like one artist and like just learned everything about them and just like that was always like my and that was kind of my I just would love that kind of like the deep delve into people and that kind of expression. And I think that became quite precious to me and then songwriting became quite precious to me. So it was always kind of the intention to a degree. And like particularly with when I first would have started before recording, I would have been playing my own songs at like school venues and things like that, you know, any school show or anything like that. I was the annoying kid with the acoustic guitar kind of a thing, you know. Yeah, so yeah, playing, you know, playing free falling John Mayer or like Jeff Buckley covers. That was kind of like my go-to at the age of 14 and up. So yeah, like but then, you know, I very quickly just was like wanted to express myself through it, which came into songwriting quite quick. So I think I don't know if I ever like considered it to be like an artist though, in terms of like maybe, you know, what an artist really means in terms of like how kind of profound of a statement that can mean in terms of like it's very, you know, it's like or like you have a cultural relevance or something like that. Like to me it was always about just kind of being personal like with it, and it just kind of leaked into that. And I think that's kind of how it still kind of is to a degree. It's just kind of me, I guess. So it's not a very straightforward answer, but yeah, it's kind of always was really the songwriting and being an artist, I guess, was always there for the intention from the very beginning.
I mean, that I guess probably was a foreshadowing of you're doing exactly what you should be doing. Like if it's from the get-go, like this is my intention, then odds are you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, hopefully.
One can hope, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
one can
right.
hope.
You never know. When it could be like something else next year.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So you kind of touched on this, but do you think that like it's when it comes to like what inspires a lot of your writing,
Mhm.
does that is that purely from like a personal experience kind of deal? Are there like certain themes amongst the things that you like write about? What kind of like honestly, just what kind of stories are you telling a lot of the time?
Yeah, yeah, I always find that a really interesting question. I even like you know, I was here listening to some of the other songwriters that you had on your podcast about kind of like their impression of that kind of a thing. And it's like it's always really interesting to hear everyone's answers to that because I always find it like it's very unique. And as someone like myself, like I do a lot of writing for other people as well and like stuff like that. So like my writing has always kind of been, I think, you know, I think everyone writes from experience to a degree, but like, you know, whether or not the content is directly foretelling what you've done is mostly not the case. Like I think for me, what I write is like the feeling, like I think, you know, to for lack of a better phrase, like you kind of just like catch a vibe of something and then you kind of just follow that through until you really have it. And I feel like that's where like the process comes in of like how well you can really perform that and really share that so that the experience is shared with other people. But yeah, so like, you know, if it's like, you know, if you're writing like a happy song or like, you know, a love song or breakup song, whatever, um often for me it doesn't quite necessarily come from a story or like a direct experience. It'll often more come from like how I'm maybe feeling that day, or like, you know, like I might just play a chord that's like quite like melancholic and that will just be kind of naturally drawn to or something like that. um i think that's I think that's always kind of been my method, is just kind of trying to chase that feeling until you feel like it's really been expressed in like an authentic way to yourself that like you really resonate with. Because I feel like if it's not that kind of authentic feeling to you, and it's not going to really resonate with other people. Yeah, so I feel like, yeah, I feel like that's kind of really what it is. Always been, for my writing, not so much maybe direct storylines, whereas like obviously there would be moments of that, but like sometimes, you know, I'd even be asking myself like, you know, am I doing this for like my friends to like turn around and be like, is that about da da da? Or like, you know what I mean? Like, which is like, seems a little bit like funny sometimes. So I wouldn't really, I wouldn't do that personally. I would rather kind of reach to people who like, you know, I don't like really know, and like would can, you know, that to me that's always a better story to hear when somebody like you've never met before, they've only kind of seen what you literally put out, which is, I guess, is how you convey yourself as an artist, and they really resonate with that. You know, I think that's really special, you know.
No, absolutely. I think that's honestly, I think you put it very well. And I think it's an approach that a lot of people take, but just obviously it looks different for everybody because everybody's different.
Of
But
course.
you ultimately want to convey a certain feeling or a certain like message. But
Hmm.
the story and the way that you kind of convey that is what is different. It's like you
Of
just,
course.
the main point is, hey, like this is what you should take away from it. But it's like how you paint that picture is really what kind of varies and what kind of has enabled us to write a million breakup songs and have each one be different and
Right.
be able to write about love in 1,000 different ways, but each one is different because we're all painting different pictures, just telling the same story.
Exactly. Like, I mean, you don't have to necessarily have gone through some crazy experience to really be able to connect to a deep emotion, you know, like you don't need to have, for instance, like a crazy breakup to really feel a loss of love or a sadness in love. Like, you know, there's, for one, there's other relationships in your life that also can make that same kind of feeling. And like, you know, you can have those feelings of loneliness or, you know, happiness or sadness or, you know, all these things. They don't necessarily have to come from those narratives, but I think those narratives are universally understood. So I think, you know, through film and, you know, TV and all these things and books and everything, we would have seen so many like showings of relationships, of particularly, I would say, romantic ones. So I think that's naturally where a lot of people tie into, and they're often as well the most like lead to being the most intimate relationships in people's lives. So like, but you don't necessarily need to have experienced any of those things to necessarily write about it directly, because you probably have in ways that maybe aren't as obvious as maybe those kind of breakups or, you know, all those kind of things.
No, absolutely. And I think what you said about it, if it's not authentic and true to you, then it's probably not going to connect with other people, is
Mhm.
what I've been trying to drive home in all of
Mhm.
these conversations for so long, because it's true. Like, that's what
Mhm.
comes down to the whole like difference between someone that's just making music and someone who's like an artist. You're an artist if you're doing what is like true to your creative self, what's true
Mhm.
to who you are as a person, and kind of conveying that in your set form. But it really is like, it comes down to, if you have that level of authenticity and you're just kind of being vulnerable when you need to be and being expressive when you need to be, then you're doing the right thing. But if you're just kind of trying to paint this picture because that's what you think other people are going to want to hear, nobody's going to care. To
No,
put it frankly, nobody's
no.
going to care if it, because if it's not true to you, then why is it true to anybody else?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. I can't really put it any better than that. It's not true to you. Exactly. Yeah, it's a funny thing. Like, I feel like, you know, particularly when so much people, and what I think is so interesting about that too is how the reality is like it might like I feel like the world has kind of shifted in the sense that like uniqueness used to be, I feel, a lot more important, and it's like, but like authenticity is really kind of quite shared. Like, yeah, of course, like we do have unique experiences of it, but like it's being authentic to yourself doesn't mean like necessarily you have to be the most unique or different, or like, you know, you could be like everybody else, but it doesn't mean you're not authentically yourself, you know.
Right.
um which I think, is also interesting. And like, you know, I think, you know, you can definitely go into a battling then, because, you know, other people then would kind of come into the mindset of like, you know, the other side of the spectrum, where you're saying like, oh, I don't want to sound like this person, or like, I don't want to, you know, I don't want to like go, but like, you know, it's like, you listen to Coldplay your whole life, or you listen to Radiohead your whole life, you love them your whole life, you know, they're going to influence you, you know, like
Yeah.
that kind of a thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's
No,
perfectly fine. You know, that's part
it's
of your,
natural.
exactly. And you should lean in it, because it's authentic, you know, and it's unique to you in that way. But also universal, because other people also have those experiences, you know. So yeah, it's that's that I've always loved that kind of that kind of philosophy of the writer or the artist, you know. I think it's kind of one that causes a lot of inner turmoil of a lot of people who try to write, particularly at the beginning. I think it can be really frustrating to like find your sound or something like that, because you're caught up on these kind of things, or you're just trying to figure out what it all means to you, you know.
No,
I still am.
absolutely. Yeah, no, and you are a product of your environment, whether you want to be or not. So it's
Mm.
like those people that you've been listening to for years, you're going to have some element likely of what they're doing in your own work. But as long as you're not a copycat, we're doing okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because it's like there's like, I feel like as well, there is a little bit of like of, you know, it's kind of comes with development as well. Like I feel like there's a little bit of copycatness, but that's kind of okay, to the point that it's like, particularly when you're learning, say, so for instance, like I guess for me, right, jazz would have come into my life in a very not a majorly late stage, but like 17, 18, when I would have been like quite late in comparison to, like, you know, I would have been exposed to pop music and all kinds of folk music and stuff like that from a very much younger age. Jazz came into my life maybe in my later years, early teens, and then particularly in my in my 20s. But you know, like there's a period there that it's like you try to start to make jazz music and you're like, this sounds weird and this is not like right at all, and it, you know, because it's new to you, and like, you know, you're just kind of copying first, and then but then eventually it kind of starts to come into you, and you start to find your footing in it then too. Like of course, like, not, you know, directly infringing on anyone's copyright issues or anything like that. You don't want to do that. But, you know, there's a huge amount of like, you know, I think was it, I'm probably getting this wrong, but I think it was Van Gogh who said like, steal like an artist, you know, you kind of have to, um, there is a kind of a part of you that has to like take from what really works and try
Mhm.
to flesh that out. And sometimes it might be new to you just because of, as you say, your background. Like, you know, I came from Ireland, so, you know, my background is, you know, particularly in the early 2000s when there wasn't you know, much internet really going on. There was only radio, and a lot of radio would have been like the top 20 pop hits of the world and stuff like that. So, you know, a very small, like lots of Justin Timberlake, stuff like that, you know, like very set things. So unless you came from a family member or something like that that had a unique access to, you know, other styles and records, you probably weren't going to be exposed to other music until you know, until you had a chance to go looking later in life for yourself. So how that would have influenced you and stuff like that, I think is also going to come into play, you know.
No, absolutely. And I think the saying goes, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but it's like if you steal from one person, you're like a thief. But if you steal from 1,000, then you're like an artist. Because
Yeah.
I mean, you can't, you don't have to reinvent the wheel
Mhm.
every time you like try and do something.
Of
There's a
course.
reason that what's been done works and what's been done doesn't work. So you want to take from what works and essentially just kind of put your own spin on it. So there
Mhm.
has to be some, and we can't just create new every single time. Like even
Of
if you
course.
try to, odds are that's going to have some element of something else in some way, shape, or form. It's just
Mhm.
so much time has gone on that it just kind of has to happen. But yeah, if you had to create a new genre or style or around your style of music, what would you call it?
Uh that's a tough question. I don't really know. I guess in where I am these days with music, it'd be some kind of it would be some kind of folk R&B jazz name. So like be like piano core or something like that. That'd be
Ooh.
like I don't know, something. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Raz and blues or something. I don't know, something silly like that. Or R&B and jazz. I was trying to do something there.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah. I mean, I think folk definitely is like one of those things that like forever exists in my life because of where I'm from and stuff like that. So I'd have to fit folk in there too somehow. So Raz and blues and folk.
yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Is there, of the like songs you've put out, is there one that you think kind of best embodies who you are as an artist? Like you have one song to show people and sell them on who you are as an artist. What
Mm.
song are you showing them?
One that's out or just like
I would start with with one that is out, and
okay.
then you can give us a sneak peek.
Okay. Yeah. Well, because yeah, it just for me, like I feel like songs have always been like kind of captured moments.
Hmm.
So and I like most of my songs now are about at least a year old. But yeah. So I think probably I would say I probably would say I lost my head. That song that I released. Just because of like but more I guess from like the place of where I was with that song to where I am now, it's kind of a bit of a maybe a triumph maybe for myself. That was definitely like kind of like the song's kind of definitely kind of portraying a moodier time in my life. Uh to which I've completely cleared of now, kind of a thing. But yeah, but I still think in terms of artistically, that one really represents the style and like what connects with me for sure.
And then as far as unreleased stuff, is there like one in particular that you
Uh,
have coming out that
I
you're
have
like,
like I have a bunch of songs coming out that are kind of I guess the after effect of those songs. And they yeah, so like I've got a song called I think Wayfaring Friend is what no, it is called Wayfaring Friend, and that will be coming out in April. But that song I think really resonates with me just because I think um I think there's a sense of kind of like wanderingness in the kind of the artist world. You're kind of there's always a sense of solitude. I feel as someone who makes music, there's always kind of that small sense of like you're kind of on your own to a degree, particularly if you're an independent artist or whatever. um and there's kind of a lot of you're always kind of going from destination to destination of figuring out what's next and what comes next and what comes next. So I definitely kind of resonate really strongly with that song right now in terms of like life just being kind of like a constant movement, not just like career wise, just like life in general. Yeah. Oh, and I have a song called This Too Shall Pass. I feel is very strong, which is again kind of about movement, about like the idea that everything passes, good and bad, kind of a thing. Yeah, so I chose three songs, but but yeah.
I mean, yeah, I mean it's always a moving thing of like what is next is probably what's going to paint the best picture, but it's just
Mhm.
not out yet, so
Yeah,
but
of course.
soon
Yeah.
enough, soon enough. So if you had to pick like two or three artists, and this kind of goes back to your whole Coldplay thing where it's like, oh, if you listen to them forever, they'll influence your music. If you had to
Mhm.
pick two or three artists that you think your music is like a combination of, what would it be?
Um, hmm. I think like um I think I'm gonna be giving all of my guilty pleasures here, but I mean I'll try to see some of the cooler stuff first. I would like I definitely would say there's like a Frank Ocean influence. I was a huge Frank Ocean fan for a really long time. Maybe then I can only imagine there's a bit of Jeff Buckley influence in there as well. But I would say in terms of like the way I write, it's probably more influence from more of the modern music I listen to, which is a lot of like Bruno Major, I think there's probably a bit of JP Sachs in there as well.
All good names.
Yeah. I love Eloise as well. Um, Trying to think. Particularly when it comes to the songwriting stuff, Eloise is like amazing. Um, yeah, I think maybe a blend of all of those. I'm trying to think. Yeah, probably them. They're probably the ones I listen to the most. Yeah.
I think Bruno Major is like exactly on brand with the whole like, oh, it's got some jazz, it's got some folk, it's got I haven't heard that name in a while, but I like used to listen to his stuff a lot, and now I think I have to go back and listen again.
Yeah. Oh, he's great. His like first album is like I still love that album. I just find there's like one of those albums that are like golden for me. It's like every song is just great on that record. Yeah, just some really, really good songwriting and production and stuff like that. It's just
Absolutely.
so cool.
Is there an outside passion of yours, like a non-music thing in life that you think kind of impacts
Um,
who you are as an artist?
a non-music thing. I mean, like I love anything that's I've always just been a big creative head. Like I love film, I love TV. Um, I love like I'm a big reader, like well, a recent big reader. My family members will laugh at that one. But no, yeah, I think definitely film and television, 100%. I've always been a huge fan of that. Like I've always kind of even hoped that like some of my music would kind of go in that direction too. Because I definitely consider myself to be like a very visual person because like with how I write and stuff, and I think it definitely influences like anything I make because I've definitely tried to create when I write things, it's definitely with like a visual intention, like to create some sort of visual intention for the listener. Um yeah, yeah, those things for sure.
No, I mean, I think with music being so like sound oriented, I mean, obviously, like, unless it's like a music video or like a concert kind of situation, there is no real like visual element to
Mhm.
it. I think kind of having that sort of other form in mind kind of can do a lot for like the creative side of the music, and even just kind of make it a more complete like artistic representation.
Oh, definitely. And like even if you listen to like or you go listen to Brian Eno and go for a walk, or like some Howard Shore, or like some cinematic song, and your life feels like a movie in itself. Then like I've always done things like that that are just kind of um like I think there is like there's room that what I love about music lacking that visual element is it gives the space for the person to create one for themselves, um which I think is always really cool. And yeah, so yeah, I think like, and there's nothing cool, like I think there's nothing like more devastating or like beautiful than like in a film when something really is well scored, or like just sounds like something happens at the right moment and like really connects with you. So yeah, I think those things definitely would always influence my music 100%.
No, that's really cool. With that kind of being said, what do you think is sort of the ideal listening scenario for someone to like listen to your music? Like what's the setting? What's the situation? What's the vibe?
um I don't anything. I kind of feel a bit bad bringing out my music and kind of coming into the summer, because I definitely think it's like cozy winter kind of, that's what you want. You want to be like, it's cold outside, but like at least it's warm in here, and you got a
Hmm.
cup of tea, you got a cup of coffee, that kind of thing. um yeah, like definitely I think it's introspective, so I think it's something's it's I don't think my songs are really one that you'd be showing to your group of friends that would get them all partying, for example. It's
Hmm.
I think I try to kind of reach the individual, I think. So yeah, it's definitely like sitting at home, you got your slippers on, the cup of tea's over sitting on the table, that kind of thing. Yeah, that's the vibe for sure.
A nice little cozy time.
Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely not a summer vibe unless you're
No.
somewhere that's cold all year round. But
True. True. It's a good thing about the
Um,
internet.
what's nice about the music world now is you could still promote it and
Yeah, for
get
sure.
people to listen to it in the winter months,
Sure.
but it just
My
won't be
brother's in
right
New
away.
Zealand, so it'll be perfect for that.
Oh yeah, there you go. What is it that you think sets you apart from other independent artists?
um, Sets me apart. Um, I think it kind of comes back to what we said earlier in terms of like being authentic. And I don't know if there's any like direct definition of that for myself that I can think of that would directly set me apart from everybody else. Um, I definitely I think honesty and authenticity are like the two important things when it comes to my writing. So like maybe that sets me apart. I don't know. But I think that's the thing that I definitely like try to like put my mask to in terms of like what's important for me is that. So yeah, I think maybe that if that's an answer.
No, that's definitely an answer. I mean, I like answering that question because some people have, or asking that question, not answering it. Because I think some people have something to say about like their like personal experience or the way that they write, or one girl even like said something about like her voice being different. Like, but it really like at the end of the day, everybody's different. Like what's going to set you apart is ultimately what makes you different. And it's like
Mhm.
you're telling stories that other people might not necessarily be telling, or at least in the way that you would tell them. And you kind of put your own spin on this universal experience that everybody's writing about. Like it's that kind of answer can kind of become very blatant
Mhm.
and like very clear. It's just a matter of like identifying it sometimes. And sometimes it's what makes us different isn't what we realize makes us different, and vice versa. So,
Mhm. Yeah,
absolutely.
as we were kind of saying, like just being a person kind of makes you different.
Hmm.
Everyone's different in that way. So,
Absolutely.
so I think, and I think that's like, and as we said, like I think really honing in on who you are is then really like what would make me different. Like, well, not honing on who you are, who I am, that kind of a thing. But yeah, so yeah.
No, and I've said this before, but it's like if you're being authentically yourself, you're already different. If you're trying
Mhm.
to be the next Taylor Swift or the
Yeah.
next like Bruno Major, even like if that's
Mhm.
what your like goal is to just do what they're doing,
Mhm.
good luck, but you're doing it wrong. To put it frankly, like you got to
Yeah.
kind of just do it your own way
Yeah.
because that's what's going to be different. People already have Taylor Swift. People already have your Bruno Majors and your Harry Styles and your One Republics and you name it.
And you're
It's
probably gonna just like land on like some sort of like crisis halfway through because you're gonna be like, who am
right.
I? After a
Right. And
while.
yeah, it's going to be a whole identity situation. Where we're just not going to be
Mhm.
having a good time with it. But
Which I think is also a part of the artist process. I think there's a bit of that too. There is a bit of like
mhm.
breaking down your own methods and breaking down who you are. I think there was like I remember seeing a David Bowie interview that it was years ago. But like it really resonated with me that it's like I think a lot of people become artists or like people in music or whatever. I think he was talking about people in music at the time, but was saying, like it's ultimately like a quest to understand yourself as a person in society, and both for yourself but also for like how you can contribute to the world.
Mhm.
And I like that's like that's ultimately the goal, and like music's not unique in that. I think a lot of things are people are ultimately looking to understand themselves deeper, but also understand themselves deeper in relation to the rest of the world.
No, absolutely. Like everybody, regardless of whether you're in a creative space or not, everybody has something that they can offer.
Mhm.
And you're doing yourself and the world the disservice if you're not putting forth what is authentically your thing to offer. Because if
Mhm.
you're just trying to do what somebody else is doing because you're like neglecting that real contribution factor, then why bother? You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
that's
In
as
this,
simple
yeah,
as that.
definitely. Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
Um, with that being said, what impact do you kind of want to have with your artistry and with your music? Like, what kind of mark do you want to leave? What kind of impact do you want to have on people?
I think reaching the individual has always been a big thing for me, like because that's always been what music's experience has been for me. Like it's always been a way to connect with myself. Like and or like listening, like even before I ever made music, listening to people's music, I kind of would, you kind of uh, like put the movie in your life of like of yourself in the shoes of the person you're listening to, and I think that's always been what I'm trying to do is like, and kind of as we said, goes back to what we're saying, even though I may not have experienced the exact experiences that you might have heard, um you know I can relate to those feelings and show that through the songwriting, like if it's a somber track or whatever, that even if you haven't gone through a breakup or whatever, something you can deeply connect with certain moments of the song. So yeah, I think it's always been about like that, like kind of touching the person, like so that they can deep maybe understand themselves better, their own emotions better, connect with their own inner self, I guess. Yeah, I think I've definitely always been like more individually like purposed in my music in that way. So like I'm not like, I don't write a song and think like of like masses of crowds. I am more thinking about the person who's sitting at home on their in their bed, or going for a walk, or that so I think that's kind of really what I make music for, and that's what the intention's always been, is just to kind of touch the hearts of the person who's listening, so that they're like, wow, that I really felt that.
No, I think like it comes back to one of those things where it's like if you can just impact one person, it feels like
Hmm.
it's all worth it.
Yeah,
Just that
absolutely.
one like person being like, "Oh, like the song you wrote, like really like I felt that." Even as simple as that. Like that will, if you're not already motivated enough, that'll motivate you more than you'll ever need.
Yeah, and it's what makes the whole experience kind of worthwhile as well, because like, like particularly if you write and produce your own music and you make a lot of your own music, you spend a lot of it could easily become kind of self-absorbed, in a way. So it's like it's nice to know that it like that like that you're like really thinking about what someone else is going to feel when they hear it, and like, yeah, so I think that's like really important for me anyway. It's always been just to kind of really connect with each person that would listen to it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. With that being said, that kind of brings us to the last question that I ask
Mhm.
every time and is the whole basis of this podcast in the first place, which is why music?
Why music? Why not?
Everybody
um
says that.
do they actually? Oh, really?
It's been said a few times. I mean,
Okay.
why not? Why not?
um yeah, I mean, like, I think we definitely touched on those reasons. I think for me, music was always at the from the very beginning, as I said, when I was like 15, when I just decided it was going to be music. Um, I think it was because music was the first thing to really, really like make me be like, oh, this is me. Like this is a bit of me right here. And if I look more into this, I can understand a bit more of that. Um, so I think that's really why, like, it was always the first thing that made me be like, wow, like, one, like I really connect this, but then also like I'm actually able to kind of do a bit of it too, and like let's see how far this goes. And I don't know if anything else would have quite done that, but who knows. But yeah, like I think that's probably why music was just the first thing, and has always been the strongest thing to really kind of help me kind of be grounded in myself. So yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think it's just like why people become doctors and
Yeah.
teachers for the right reasons at least. Like it's just naturally what you're drawn to and I think if you follow what you're naturally drawn to, you're doing something right. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, having
Or
that
even
kind of
just like, sorry.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Or sorry, even just like even just like being willing to experiment in that space
Mhm.
as well, like, is, like most of the battle, putting yourself out there and just kind of like seeing if it works, seeing if it doesn't, and just being happy to try again. I think that's a part of like everything. So like music just is that so strongly, because like you're only kind of as like you're always making new things, and you're always getting better, and you're always improving. So like there's so much of that contributes, like can also be reflected in the rest of your life. So like yeah, I think it's just was kind of a natural progression for that, because it kind of, as you get older and improve in things and get worse at other things, so does your music.
Right.
um yeah.
No, and I think it kind of goes back to like what you said earlier, where it was just like it didn't matter in what form, but it was going to be music. Like
Hmm.
that just kind of speaks to it being truly like your calling, if you will. Like it's
Hmm.
like literally, why not? If that's all that's ever been calling your name, really the question is more why not
Yeah,
instead of
yeah, and
just
like
why.
I was lucky that like I was born in a position that I was able to go to school and be educated in music and stuff like that too. So like it was really great in that way too, that like I was able to have that opportunity to go off and pursue a career in music. um but yeah, so I think I think if you have the chance, and in whatever quantity that might be, it might be your career, it might not be, I think everyone should give it a go, because I think you'll find something about yourself regardless of how deep into it you want to go. I think music has something to offer everybody in that way, like every creative act, but I think music really speaks to people in a different way. I think it really can show yourself ways of things about yourself that you don't really fully understand, and might take years to, and you might make a career out of it in the meantime.
No, absolutely. I think that's kind of all you can really look for is just what is it that's
Mhm.
calling your name, and it's music. But having that like just being able to experience it more, it's probably just does a lot and just kind of enhances that passion and ultimately drives home that this is really what I want to be doing.
Yeah, and also just, and it's great is what I think. Music's so cool in that, like, it's always like you meet such great people as well. Like so much like kindness exists in the music industry, despite like the world thinks of the music industry. They're like artists and other artists and musicians and writers and stuff, and like are like some of the most interesting people I've ever met, and like also just like have like a lot of the time. Of course, there's always a few black sheep and everything. Um, I've just like this like just pure sense of kindness and givingness that they just want to kind of like put out into the world. And like what, like, to me that's such a privilege to be part of something like that, and you get to meet people from around the world. There's so many, particularly in this day and age, like music is such a great thing to be a part of, because it's so fast moving, and there's so much reach now, and there's so many different avenues you can do. Yeah, so it's really, really cool.
Absolutely. Well, I think that brings us to the end of this episode of the Why Music podcast. Check back again next week for another conversation with another independent artist. Thanks for listening.